moved on magnetic wheels down the corridor to a compartment in the skin of the ship, away from all the radiation shielding and whatever high-tech wizardry Cortázar's team had come up with to lock their sample away from the rest back beyond the gate. Nothing happened. No response yet, Trevon said. Gee, really? Fires replied, the sarcasm in his tone meant for everyone else. Trevon heard. While the protomolecule might communicate in ways that looked like they were faster than light once it got going, it didn't start it right away. Since locality wasn't a big deal for the protomolecule, but the speed of light was, Elvie suspected it was some slower-than-light handshake as the two network nodes agreed on the protocol to be used. That was somewhere between a guess and a metaphor, but it helped her to think about it. Her sample came out of Cortázar's laboratory pens. It hadn't existed until the recent past. Everything they were trying to interact with here had been waiting since humanity had been a kinky idea that two amoebas came up with. So somehow, when her node came into physical proximity, meaning somewhere in the same solar system, for the first time, they were creating some kind of relationship to each other on the fly, which was awesome, but also weird, and not how quantum entanglement worked, unless somehow it was. In her study of the protomolecule and the civilization that had created it, Elvie often found herself glad she wasn't a physicist. What the protomolecule did biologically, while not entirely explicable yet, at least seemed like it might be fully understood someday. The mechanisms by which it hijacked life and repurposed it were incredibly advanced, but not totally dissimilar to things like viruses and parasitic fungi. She didn't understand all the rules yet, but she felt like she could, given enough time and research. What the protomolecule did to physics looked less like a variation and refinement of the standard models, and more like kicking the game table over and scattering the pieces across the floor. Elvie wondered if Jen Lively's constant lighthearted joking was so she didn't go insane as her understanding of reality was ripped to shreds in front of her on a daily basis. Getting a reaction, Trevon said. Yeah, Jen agreed. Something's happening in the object. What was the delay on that? Elvie asked. 18 minutes. They were 9 light minutes from the structure, so that made a handshake propagating at or near C plausible. She really needed to write that hypothesis up and run it past the nanoinformatics staff. Elvie's screens went wild with readings from the catalyst sensor package. It was too much data to be analyzed in real time, so Elvie let it wash over her like a wave of numbers and graphs. There would be plenty of opportunity later to figure out what it all meant. Looking stable so far, Trevon said. Always glad when things don't immediately blow up, Elvie said, but no one laughed. You know what makes a diamond green? Jen asked everyone, and no one. I looked it up. Radiation, Fire said. Of course he knew. He'd been on the Ellis team too, as his geologist. While the opening of the protomolecule gate network had given Elvie more than 1,300 new biospheres to study, it had given Fires 10 times that many new geologies to explore. Some of them as exotic as a great huge lump of carbon crystal that was a really pretty color. Diamonds that form in the presence of radiation can get that green color. Some people mistake them for emeralds, but totally different mineral. Emeralds are beryl, not carbon. Stealing my thunder there, sport, Jen said. But I'm betting it means that this star was a lot more active when the object was formed. My best guess, based on stellar decay, is that the object is almost 5 billion years old. That's been hanging out for about a third of the time the universe has, existed. That would make it one of the oldest artifacts we've found, Trevon said, suddenly interested. Maybe something from the very beginning of their civilization. Fascinating, Segales said, his clipped tones the only sign of his impatience. What's it doing? What's it doing that helps us fight ghoulies from beyond? beyond time and space, was the implied question. For all her bottomless budget, for all the cream-of-the-crop science team she'd been given, and her custom-built state-of-the-art ship, there was only one result the High Consul and his science directorate cared about. How do we stop the things that eat ships passing through the gates? I don't know, she said. Let me take a look. 18 hours into their data collection, Elvie retired to her cabin. She'd learned early on that the military discipline of the Laconians didn't extend to forcing people to work on no rest. Duarte wanted everyone at peak efficiency. Baked into that was the idea that most people would spend a third of their day sleeping. When Elvie climbed out of her couch and said she needed to rest before she began her analysis, Segala didn't bat an eye. It was a trick she'd started using to buy uninterrupted work time. She'd been able to go 24 hours straight since grad school. Some caffeine tablets and hot tea, and she could go 48 if she needed to. Not sleeping bought her 8 or 9 hours without Segala's questions about results and timetables. But the gag only worked if everyone pretended that she actually was sleeping, so for Fayez to burst in meant he had something big. It made a copy. Before Elvie could ask what had made a copy and what it had made a copy of, he'd floated over to the dining table in the middle of her cabin and slapped his terminal down on it. The electromagnetics in the table kept the terminal from floating away, but the impact sent Fayez tumbling gently toward the wall. He was an earther, born and raised, and no matter how much time he spent in space, he never seemed to lose that instinctive expectation of gravity. As he drifted away, he yelled at the table, Show her! Show her the thing! Display last file, volumetric display." A holographic map of what looked like a human brain appeared, floating above the table. The brain sparked with flashing synaptic paths, probably an fMRI or fNARS scan. Elvie had seen this particular brain often enough to know it belonged to the catalyst, that it had been a woman once upon a time. Fayez hit the bulkhead and pushed off with one foot, rejoining her at the table. "A lot of activity," Elvie said, "but taking her out of her pen might be causing her stress or physical discomfort. Nothing here is all that unusual." "That's just her being her," Fayez said, shaking his head and tapping away at his journal. "Look at this." A second image appeared. It took Elvie a moment to recognize that it was a copy of the catalyst's brain activity, but without the physical structure of the brain. "I don't understand. What's that second image from?" "That," Fayez said with a grin, "is coming from the object." "What? The whole thing is mirroring her brain activity?" "No, it's very localized," Fayez said, and tinkered with the controls. The second image zoomed out for a long time until the entire object was in view. A tiny white dot appeared. That dot is not to scale, of course. It'd be the size of Greenland at this distance. But that's the approximate location of the image. He tapped some more, and the image was replaced with long strings of sensor data. Gems started picking up some EM fluctuation in the surface of the object. I mean, in context, it's tiny, but the object is totally inert. And the sensors on this boat are as sensitive as a galactic tyrant's money can buy. "Okay," Elvie said. "What does she think we're looking at?" At first, it just looked like some photons bouncing around, until Jen put together this map. No one knew what we were looking at until Travan said, "Hey, that looks like an fMRI." I pulled up the catalyst's monitor, and boom, there we were. Elvie didn't mind space, but the one thing it lacked that she needed right then was the ability to collapse into a chair. She felt a rush of adrenaline that made her hands tingle and her legs go numb. So they're echoing each other? Like looking in a mirror. In a mirror. "Oh," she said. Then, "Okay. That's huge. Oh, it gets huger, Fayez said. All across the object, we're now seeing radiation hotspots. He zoomed in on one, and a new rush of numerical data splashed across the image. Like this. He was looking at her expectantly, waiting for her to make the connection. She didn't think she was all that tired, but whatever flash of insight he was looking for just wasn't there. I give up. It took us a minute too, Fayez said. He pulled up a third image. LV recognized a ring gate. This is the same kind of radiation that sprays out of the gate during a transit. Almost before the numbers hit her screen, LV had it. That correlated to the catalyst. Yes, catalyst brain, green diamond thing copy, and weird distributed gate-like radiation. 3 things, all with the same pattern, Fayez said. LV pulled the image of the huge green diamond back until she could see the whole thing at once. It seemed to flicker with tiny stars of light appearing and disappearing where the computer marked the radiation spikes for her. This thing is filled with gates, like in the physical structure of the object itself. We have a theory, Fayez said. He was grinning like he had the first time she agreed to sleep with him. He was a goofball, but she liked what made him happy. Knowing things, and her. It's too early for theories, she said. I know, but we have one anyway. And by we, I mean Travan first, but we're all on board. This thing comes in contact with a protomolecule-infected mind. It makes a copy of that mind. Then these gate signatures start showing up all over the object. Travan starts talking about how secure data storage works. You take the physical imprint, that's the encoded data, and you scatter it. You put it in a bunch of discrete storage locations with tags and code built in so that if any portion of the storage system is lost, the rest of it knows how to rebuild the lost portion from the scattered fragments. Elvie, who was a lot more computer literate than Fayez, started, That's not exactly... So, then Jen says, a diamond is a super dense and incredibly regularly structured mass of carbon atoms. If you had a way to shift things around without damaging the overall structure, it'd make a great data storage material. Elvie paused, her mind ticking through the implications. A way like tiny, tiny wormholes, Elvie said. Right? We know that the protomolecule builders seem to have had a hive mind or one brain, however you want to parse that. Instantaneous, non-localized communication across all the various nodes and entities, all across their corner of galaxy. But shit happens, even to them. Asteroids hit planets, or earthquakes, or volcanoes, or whatever. Anything that's stored in a single node is lost forever when that node is destroyed. So what if what we're looking at is the backup drive for their entire civilization? Everything they ever knew, packed into a carbon lattice the size of Jupiter. That, Elvie said, is one gigantic fucking logical leap. Yeah, he nodded, but his grin remained undiminished. Totally unfounded, complete guesswork. We'll need generations of scientific studies to verify what this thing is, and then generations more to crack the code on how to dig out the data, if any such data exists. But Els, he said, almost breathless with excitement. I mean, what if? Admiral Segale floated beside his desk, looking over navigational charts on a large wall display. Elvie could see a course plotted from their current position through the Kalma Gate and into the hub, then out again through the Tacoma Gate and into the next dead system on their galactic tour. Tell me that this system is the most important scientific discovery of all time, Segale said, not even looking up when she floated into his office. It might very well, Elvie started. But the big crystal flower in Naraka system was the most important discovery. It was an astonishing artifact, Elvie agreed. But compared to... Before that, it was the trinary star system in Charon, And the planet where it rained glass shards. Well, that was more just really cool. You have to admit it was pretty spectacular. He turned to give her his full attention. I'm hearing you say, once again, that there are artifacts in this system that are critical to future investigation, Segala said. He seemed weary and vaguely disappointed. Just like the big crystal flower. LV went through it for him, and as she said it, Faiez's theory seemed more and more plausible. Segala stared at her through half-closed eyes as she spoke. When she told him that the diamond outside might actually house every piece of information the gate network builders had ever had, a muscle in his cheek twitched. But that was the only sign of his surprise. That is interesting. Please write up that theory and include it with a data dump when we send everything back to Laconia during the transit. I apologize for lumping this in with the flowers and glass rain. This actually does seem impressive. His grudging admission stung a little, but she let it go. Sir, Elby said, Met, this might be everything the High Consul sent us on this mission to find. This might be it. It is not, Segala said, but she pushed on. I strongly encourage you to send word back to the Admiralty asking for more time. But there are 1,000 more tests we can be running while we wait for additional personnel and ships to join us. Leaving now gains us nothing. And you believe you will be able to access this data if I give you that time? Segala said. LV almost lied, hungry for the chance to stay a little while longer and learn a little bit more, but no, I can't say that. In fact, it will almost certainly be the work of decades, maybe centuries, to solve this problem, if it even is solvable. But this is our best shot. Nothing we find in Tacoma will be as important as this. I feel pretty safe guaranteeing that. Then we'll keep to our schedule and see whether you're right, Segala said, already turning away. Get secured. We burn for Tacoma in 80 minutes. 78 minutes later, LV lay in her crash couch waiting to drown. The problem with space travel had always, from the very beginning, been the fragility of human bodies. In spite of these limitations, humanity had done itself pretty proud even before Laconia. Now they were improving by leaps and bounds. The Falcon could make the travel time from one system to another almost trivial by comparison to the standard science vessels and freighters of the civilian fleet. A journey of weeks could be accomplished in days. The Falcon would even give most of Duarte's military ships a run for their money. But the price of all that acceleration was the full submersion crash couch, a diabolical device that completely surrounded the human body in shock-absorbing gel and filled the lungs with highly oxygenated fluid to make the chest cavity as incompressible as possible. For days. I don't understand what he wants, she said. He is a complicated man, Faiez said from the couch next to hers. It's like he doesn't want us to find anything interesting. Every time we do, he gets grumpy. You took your pre-flight meds? Yes, she said, even though she wasn't sure she'd actually remembered to. They weren't critical. I feel like he's got some other agenda he's not telling us. Almost certainly because he's got some other agenda he isn't telling us, Faiez said. That can't be surprising, Elf. It's got to be something more important than this, she said. What would be more important than this? To him? I don't know. Maybe he just hates learning. Traumatized by a science fair when he was young. 10 seconds. I love you, Elf. I love you too, she said. I remember when juice was something they injected you with, not something you breathed. I remember I didn't like it at the time. Price of progress. She was looking for something clever to say back, but then the fluid poured in the way it always did, and silenced her. Chapter 6. Alex. The gathering storm was the absolute state-of-the-art in Laconian naval technology. The first ship of her class to be fielded, She was intended to be the prototype of an entire fleet of fast attack destroyers that could patrol the many systems of the Gate network and project Laconian power to every corner of the Empire. She had a keel-mounted railgun, capable of firing a 3.5-kilo slug every 5 seconds at velocities that would punch a hole through smaller moons. She had 2 separate batteries of torpedo launchers with 4 rails on each, and a fast reload system that could have another 8 fish in the tubes and ready to fire less than 70 seconds after the first barrage was let loose. She was defended on all sides by a network of 12 rapid-fire point defense cannons, and every angle of approach on the ship was covered by at least 4 of them. She was, as Alex's co-pilot Casper liked to quip, a couple thousand tons of fuck up your day stuffed into a 5-kilo sack. Nestled inside the massive cargo hold of the Pendulum, she was also defenseless. Sitting on the pilot's couch, waiting for the go signal and knowing that if someone realized they were there and started firing, he wouldn't even be able to see it on radar, made Alex's scalp itch. The Pendulum fed them her scopes, so they weren't completely blind, but she was a lumbering, heavy freighter. Her threat detection was mostly so she didn't run into a stray hunk of rock. The low-res radar and grainy telescope shots he had to look at did little to calm his nerves. "So, you and the boss go way back, right?" Casper said. He sat second couch on the Storm, behind and to the right of Alex's chair. Casper Asoal was a short, skinny kid, with a motion tattoo of a running cheetah on one shoulder and the wispiest hint of a goatee. In spite of looking way too young for the job, he was a hell of a good pilot, quick to obey an order and perfectly charming company. Alex had rapidly discovered that they had nothing in common outside of a love of flying, so other than a casual greeting, the only time they ever seemed to talk was sitting at the Storm's controls. Alex didn't hold it against the kid. He remembered being a young pilot and trying his hardest to hide his nervousness by chatting up the older officers. "Yeah, Gunny and I have known each other for a long damn time." "See, that's funny. She's captain of this ship, but you guys all call her Gunny. That was a rank or something, right? Back on Mars?" "Something like that," Alex replied. "She'll always be Gunny to me." Casper was running the pre-flight as he talked, fingers tapping softly on the screens. On Alex's monitor, the checklist rolled past, each system verified and reporting green before Casper moved on to the next, with Alex giving the final okay to his work. His co-pilot was thorough and efficient. He took his job seriously. It kind of made Alex wish the kid were 30 years older so they could be friends. "She give you any hint on what this op is about?" Casper asked, then threw the weapons store's inventory to Alex's screen for his double check. "I showed 200 slugs in the railgun mag, 80 fish in the pipes, all PDCs shown green and full," Alex said, sliding his finger down the inventory list as he went. "And no, she's an old operator. Keeping her mouth shut gets drilled into those guys pretty hard." "Copy. 200 in the railgun, 80 torpedoes, PDCs full, and greens across the board verified," Casper said. "Yeah, but I figured since you guys were friends, maybe she gave you some kind of heads up." "She did not, and I wouldn't ask." "We'll know when we need to know, and that's good enough for me," Alex said. Then, with the pre-flight complete, spun his couch around to face Casper. "It's okay to be nervous." Casper nodded. He didn't look embarrassed at all to be discussing his fear. Alex felt another little rush of affection for him. He was a good kid. Alex hoped he'd make it through to the other side of the Laconia business, but the odds on that were pretty short for all of them. "I knew a guy on Palace," Casper said. "It wasn't like we were tight. We never seriously dated or anything. But when I'd go through the station on cargo runs, we'd hook up. Ben Yi. I liked him." A tear formed at the corner of his eye, and then failed to be pulled down his cheek in the gentle quarter-G burn of the Pendulum's drive. He didn't make the evacuation? Nope, Casper said, then wiped his eyes. They say that the Tempest turned the station into rubble so fast, no one would even have seen the actual attack coming. I guess if you have to go, that's not the worst. I'm sorry, Alex said. Everyone on the Storm had their reason to hate the Laconians. Everyone had a story. The only answer for most of them was, I'm sorry. It felt pretty limp. If this all gets blown up, Casper said, turning his attention back to his screens and going through his checklists one more time. I want you to know, you don't have to worry about me. If that big bastard Tempest comes after us, the only thing I'll be thinking is how can I make a hole in it? I know, man, Alex said, then patted the kid's knee before turning around. No doubts. Come on, said Bobby's voice in his ear, where the comm bud was inserted. Bobby only called him Kamal when they were on and off, and other ears were listening. It meant go time. Kamal copies from the flight deck, Cap, he replied, sitting up straight in his couch. From the hiss of the gimbals behind him, he knew Casper was doing the same. Even the crash captures on the Storm sounded slick. I need a go, no-go for deployment, Bobby said. Pendulum cuts us loose on your word. We're all greens up here on the flight deck. Go on your command. Outstanding, Bobby said. Okay, kids, word came down, and here's the op. Listen close, because I don't have time to repeat myself. Alex hated flying ballistic. No drive meant he had maneuvering thrusters at most. No active sensors was like piloting with his eyes half closed. The Storm had a tiny radar profile for such a large ship. Something about the hull materials just absorbed or bounced off at an angle almost any radar that hit it. She could also dump all her waste heat into internal heat sinks for several hours and run liquid hydrogen through capillaries in her skin, keeping the hull temperature pretty close to zero. Unless someone was really looking for her, she'd just show up as a slightly warmer spot in space with a radar profile not much bigger than a bunk bed. Alex could remember when a destroyer with similar technology had killed his old ship, the Canterbury. How terrifying it had been when a gunship seemed to materialize out of the dark of space and started firing torpedoes. Apparently, that came standard now. Still, he could relate to what their intended targets were about to experience. 1 minute, Casper said. There was no time for sympathy. Copy that 1 minute, Alex replied, then switched channels over to Bobby. Cap, we're go in 60 seconds. Your team ready? Kids are belted in and ready for a roller coaster ride, she replied. Copy that, Alex said, then watched the countdown timer on his screen drop towards 0. 3, 2, 1. Mark. Mark, Casper said, and the Storm flared to life around them. The screen switched to active sensors and telescope shots of their target, a fat transport union freighter escorted by 2 Laconian frigates. Behind the freighter lay Jupiter's vast bulk. And that was, according to Bobby's pre-mission brief, the reason for all the secrecy beforehand. Whether or not they could make their attack run depended on the resistance partisans on the freighter's crew getting the signal out from the ship's course and date of entry into the Sol system, all while working around a Laconian political officer who had been stashed on board. Because for the attack to work, it had to all happen while Jupiter blocked line of sight to Earth and the Magnetar-class battleship parked there. It was a lot of moving parts, any one of which could have failed out at a moment's notice, and launching the attack meant burning some spies in the Union. If things hadn't panned out, the Storm would have just climbed back into her berth on the Pendulum and flown away, her crew none the wiser, and the spies on the freighter undiscovered. But the prize was worth the risk. A ship directly from Laconia with highly sensitive cargo attached to some secret Laconian project and replacement parts for the Tempest itself. Hopefully, also some of the weird fuel pellets the Laconian ships used that couldn't be manufactured anywhere else, and which the Storm was getting dangerously low on. Ammunition for the Storm's weapons, and for the power armor suits Bobby's team wore. Taking the freighter meant keeping the Underground's best weapon armed in operation, possibly for years. And, best of all, the political officers. Taking them alive would be a huge intelligence win. If Alex could take care of 2 escort frigates and deliver Bobby's dropship to the freighter. "They spotted us," Casper said. No surprise there. With the Storm pinging away with active radar, she was lit up like a Christmas tree. "Jammers on," Alex said, and the Storm drowned the little fleet in static, cutting them off from each other and from any outside help. The 3 ships didn't change course, apparently deciding the smartest move was to try to get around Jupiter. It was their best strategy. Alex would have done the same, which was why he prepared for it. "Cap, launching you now. Make sure you come back," Alex said, and hit the button that hurled the strike team's high-speed breaching pod at the freighter. Bobby and her boarding party throwing themselves at the enemy ship like pirates. While the pod burned hard toward the transport Union ship, Alex fired 2 precisely angled shots from the railgun past it and through the freighter's drive cone. The shots covered the thousands of kilometers separating the ships in a handful of seconds, and the freighter's drive winked out. "Get ready. They'll be coming for us now," Alex told Casper, and almost as if on cue, the Storm buzzed an angry target lock warning at them. "PDC's hot," Casper said. Alex was surprised at how calm his tone was. For all the sadness and fear the kid had expressed in the moments before the flight, now that the battle was on, he had become almost machine-like. "Ready for incoming. Tubes 2 and 4 are locked. We should close a bit, cut off their options," Alex said. The 2 frigates were not a trivial threat, but the Storm massively outclassed them in tonnage and firepower, and he didn't worry too much about flying straight at them, fangs out, and trying to end the fight quickly. "Copy that. 1 and 3 loaded and locked if we need them." Acceleration pressed Alex back into his couch as he closed the gap. In the distance, Bobby's pod had reached the crippled freighter and was firing grapples to lock the 2 ships together. The frigates couldn't talk to each other, but their crews had some emergency plans already on the books because they split up and flew away from the freighter in opposite directions, as if they coordinated the maneuver. "They're trying to get on both sides of us," Alex said, but Casper was already on it. He was tasking half their PDCs with one ship and half with the other. Didn't matter if they came from both directions at once. The Storm's flak screen could handle it. Down at the freighter, Bobby's pod suddenly flared to life in a massive deceleration burn. Alex had crippled the freighter's drive, but the ship was still hurtling along with whatever velocity it had had before the engine went out. Bobby's pod was programmed to push back against that speed on a vector that would keep the freighter safely hidden behind Jupiter. Part boarding pod, part secondary aftermarket temporary braking thruster. "We're on board," Bobby said. Her voice phase shifted into a robotic screech as it cut through the static from their jamming. "We have fast movers," Casper said at the same moment the alert showed up on Alex's threat board. The 2 frigates unloaded their tubes. Alex ignored them, waiting for the missiles to get into PDC range so the Storm could chew them up. "Let's go ahead and start shooting back," Alex said. And a moment later, the Storm shuddered as if with pleasure as she fired 4 torpedoes of her own. Before the rapidly closing missiles could even pass each other, 2 of the incoming torpedoes veered off in a wide turn. "Worry about the 2 that are still coming at us," Alex said to Casper, and then stopped thinking about that. The other 2 Laconian torpedoes were now winging in a wide arc toward the freighter, and the 2 frigates had also flipped and started a hard burn back toward their former charge. They hadn't been able to draw the storm away or shoot it down. Their plan B appeared to be scuttling the freighter. Bloodthirsty, but not unexpected. Alex threw the throttle down to catch the swiftly slowing freighter as quickly as possible, shifting from attacking their prey to protecting it. For a moment, everything was falling to the central point in space defined by the crippled ship. The storm, 8 torpedoes on wide, looping courses to find their targets, the 2 frigates burning back. On the threat-board, it looked like the freighter had turned into a black hole, and its gravity was sucking everything, large and small, into its event horizon. In its way, it was beautiful. Then, everyone was shooting. Casper's PDCs cut down all 4 of the Laconian torpedoes in an instant, even as 2 of the storms impacted on the nose of one of the frigates, and the plasma warheads turned the front half of the ship into glowing slag. The other frigate spun and slewed sideways and shot down the torpedoes chasing it, then continued its rotation and gave the freighter and Bobby's attached breaching pod a full broadside from its PDC array. The freighter was riddled with holes, and plumes of escaping atmosphere jetted out, looking a bloody pink in the reddish light coming off Jupiter. Or maybe there was some actual blood mixed in there. As many holes as the freighter had taken, it defied belief that no one on board had been hit. "Splash that one," Alex ordered, but Casper was already saying, "I got that motherfucker." The frigate killed its rotation with a massive blast from its maneuvering thrusters, then its drive. Even though it only slowed down, it seemed to leap straight at the approaching storm. The 2 ships passed at high speed, every PDC blazing. The much smaller frigate was hit by half a dozen of the storm's cannons all at once, and seemed to just come apart into a cloud of chaff as it passed by. But it unleashed a barrage of its own before it died that cut along the storm's flank. Suddenly, the ship was a cacophony of alarms, sirens, and alerts from the control panel. "Damage!" Alex yelled over the din. The noise was getting gradually quieter, which meant at least the flight deck was in the process of losing its atmosphere. He grabbed his helmet from under his couch and locked it into place. He could see Casper doing the same. "Damage!" he yelled again, but heard only static on his suit speakers. He banged his fist on the side of the helmet in frustration, then spun around. Casper was pointing at his mouth and ears, signaling that his suit radio seemed not to be working either. Alex flipped through the pages of damage reports popping up on his screen and found the culprit. A PDC round had cut through the computer nexus that controlled all intraship and intership communications, and for whatever reason, the backup wasn't taking over. Maybe it was fucked too. It looked like there were a lot of flashing red lights on the engineering panel. But the storm would heal the hull breaches, just like it always did, and damage control teams were already on the move to bring their other systems back online. The storm would survive, Alex had no doubt. But the freighter, with Bobby and her strike team on it, was tumbling through space, out of control and empty of atmosphere. And with the radio down, there was no way for him to know if anyone on it was still alive. Chapter 7. Bobby. "Cap, launching you now. Make sure you come back," Alex said. The breaching pod shook as the storm cut it loose. The drive came on a moment later, slamming Bobby back into her couch and leaving her with nothing to do while the battle raged around her. The storm's breaching pod was a little more high-tech than the Martian version Bobby had trained on, but there was only so much you could do with something so simple. The basic concept was a small troop carrier with an engine on one end and an airlock that could blow holes into enemy ships on the other. The interior was a closed-walled metal box fitted with crash couches. The flying coffin joke Marines had been making for centuries would have made perfect sense even to the ancient soldiers who rode into battle in armored personnel carriers with wheels. If you die before you get to the fight, you're already boxed up for eternal rest. People always claim that waiting for the fight was the hardest part of fighting. Bobby had said it herself as a younger woman. When the fight is coming, when it's inevitable, let's just fucking get to it. Once the battle starts, things happen too fast to worry about. The fear is all instinctual, not intellectual. Somehow, that used to feel better. Age had changed that. Bobby had learned to see the quiet moment before the fight as a blessing, a gift. Very few people who were headed toward death even knew it was happening, much less had time to sit and reflect on their life, what they'd done that mattered, whether it would be a good death. Bobby's father had already been a legendary Marine in the MMC before she was born. When his family started to grow, he left the front lines and became an even more legendary training sergeant. An entire generation had learned what it meant to be a Martian Marine under Sergeant Major Draper at Hecate Base. A giant of a man, with a face that looked like it had been cut from flint. He had always seemed invincible. An immutable fact of nature, like the avatar of Olympus Mons, come to life and walking among the mortals. When he'd died, he'd been a tiny, shriveled husk, lying in his bed, hooked to tubes and monitors that only prolonged the inevitable. He'd held her hand and said, "I'm ready. I've done this 12 times before." She hadn't understood at the time, but now she thought he was talking about sitting right where she was now, in the transport, heading toward battle, examining his life as he rushed toward its possible end. Who am I? Did the things I accomplished matter? Will I leave the universe a better place than I found it? If I don't come back, what are my regrets? What are my victories? It was a thing maybe only a warrior could understand. Only those who made the choice to run toward the fire instead of away from it. That made it feel sacred to her. "This far and no farther," she whispered. Her litany to the tyrants and bullies and despots. "This far and no farther. If my life means anything after I'm gone," she thought, "I hope it meant that." "What's that, boss?" Jillian asked. Her number 2 was strapped into the crash couch directly across the pod from her. "Just talking to myself," Bobby said. Then she started to sing. "Anything you can do, I can do better. I can do anything better than you." "Never heard that one," Jillian said, then sang along, trying to catch the tune. "That new? Sounds belter." Bobby laughed. "No idea. My mother used to sing it. My brothers were older, and I hated losing to them at anything. I'd burst into tears when they'd win, and she'd sing that song to me. It's one of those things you pick up when you're a kid and never put back down." "I like it," Jillian said, then closed her eyes and started mumbling to herself. It looked like she was praying. Bobby knew she wasn't. She was running through the mission in her mind, over and over. 2 meters through the breach toe to the first junction, turn left. 12 meters to the engineering hatch, breach end clear. 3 meters to the right is the master console. The other warrior's litany. There are people I love. There are people who have loved me. I fought for what I believed, protected those I could, and stood my ground against the encroaching darkness. Good enough. The pod screeched a short-lived collision alarm at them. The storm had sent her pair of railgun shots past the hull close enough that Bobby could have reached out and swatted them as they went by. "Brace for impact," she said, using her sergeant voice, as forceful as it could be without quite being a shout. This was her job now, to seem an immutable fact of nature. The avatar of Olympus Mons come to life and striding through the battlefield. God of war now, shriveled husk later. Maybe, if she wasn't lucky. All around her, her squad of 6 hand-picked strike team members locked and inflated their couches. All of them wore Laconian marine power armor, though the blue color scheme had been repainted black. They were, as her father would have said, the pick of the litter. Gillian from Freehold, and 5 of the Belters. The Belters were old-school OPA, grizzled veterans of the endless insurgent war with the inner planets before Laconia came and made that irrelevant. Old men and women well practiced in conflict. Her total force on the Storm numbered 40, and included warriors from nearly every one of the old factions. But for a high-speed snatch-and-grab boarding action, you couldn't find better fighters than Belters. "Battle mode," Bobby said, and her armor woke up, humming with impatience for the fight. The HUD flashed an ammunition inventory at her, then minimized it into one corner of her field of view. A wireframe layout of the interior of the freighter they were about to board appeared and moved to a different corner. The list of 6 names and the green dot showing they were alive and undamaged scrolled down the left side of her view and remained. Getting everyone back with a green dot instead of a black one was always a mission priority, even if it was never top. A flashing message appeared in the center of her field of view. "Free fire authorization." "Free fire, Alpha Team, Captain Roberta Draper," she said. Through the suit radio, she heard the distant clicks as 6 suits of armor activated their weapons. She'd never needed to do that as a fire team sergeant back in her Martian Marine Corps days. The Corps issued weapons to people and assumed they would use them correctly and according to their training. The Laconians were much more top-down. Winston Duarte had founded Laconia by betraying Mars and looting the Navy. It wasn't a great surprise that distrust of the people in his chain of command was institutional. The HUD flashed a new diagram at her. The relative position of the breaching pod and the freighter, along with a rapidly decreasing distance to target. "Ready," she growled at her team. "Go in 5. The breaching pod shuddered as it fired grapples and grabbed the freighter. There was a quick, sideways jerk, and then the 2 ships slammed together. The impact of the freighter was significant, but wrapped as she was in the soft gel interior of her high-tech armor and resting on the inflated padding of her crash couch, it just felt like a sudden pressure on her chest that vanished almost instantly as the pod lost its acceleration and went into freefall. That was a good sign. It meant Alex had hit his target with the railgun shots, and the freighter was on the drift. "Get ready for the burn," she said. The last word almost lost in the sudden roar of the pod firing its massive braking thrusters to keep the freighter hidden behind Jupiter. Her couch automatically unlocked and swung the other direction, putting her back to the thrust. A new pressure mounted in her chest as the G-forces piled on. When the burn started to ease up, she yelled, "Go, go, go!" But it wasn't really necessary. Her fire team was up and out of their couches the second the thrust stopped. Gillian hit the wall panel next to the airlock and extended the breaching sleeve. It made an airtight seal with the freighter, the deck vibrating with the impact. 2 seconds later, shaped charges inside the sleeve cut a hole through both hulls of the Transport Union freighter, and the airlock door slid open. Gillian was inside first, dropping through the glowing red hole into the freighter. She hit the bulkhead of the first corridor she reached and launched herself to the left, heading toward engineering. Hernandez and Orm followed her. "We're on board," Bobby said on the command channel, back to Alex on the Storm. Their Laconian gear was modulating the signal to match the jamming, which would hopefully let their radio cut through. But Bobby wasn't entirely confident in the system. It didn't really matter yet. Alex would be busy fighting the 2 frigates no matter what her team was doing. Any messages back and forth before the Storm had secured the freighter's flight space were perfunctory. She followed into the breach, the other 3 members of the strike team close behind her. When Bobby hit the corridor wall, she turned right toward the command deck. The hallway they were in was actually the central lift of the ship, and closed hatches marked each deck as they passed, Most of them would lead to cargo space, a few to the crew's living quarters. One would lead to the ops deck, and that was the only one Bobby cared about. Jillian and her team would take control of the drive and life support down in engineering. Bobby would take the ops deck and cut off communication with the outside world. If the political officer wasn't in ops when she arrived, it wouldn't matter. They controlled the ship and search at their leisure, for values of leisure up to maybe 5 or 10 whole minutes. "Watch those hatches," she told her team as she skimmed along the bulkhead toward ops. It felt redundant. Their suits were scanning every square centimeter around them for heat, radiation, even the unique electromagnetic signature generated by a beating human heart. It was pretty tough to get the drop on someone wearing Laconian armor, but saying something reminded the team you were there, that you were in charge, and that keeping everyone safe was on your mind. "Copy that," Takeshi said. "Most of these aren't warm. Guessing the cargo is in vacuum." "Guy in a vac suit coming at us from behind is low probability," she agreed, "but low ain't zero." Bobby's HUD flashed an overlay over a door one deck ahead.
I'm not sure it's still working, but just in case it is. So here is my birdie, and it's done. This bolster is done, and I got 3 to go. Maybe I will go back online to show you another one. Maybe I won't. If I do, I will see you then. If I don't, I will see you later. Take care of yourself and have a good night.